Hi, also this week we're turning to presentism and eternalism in more detail, or in fact we're looking at the ontological implications of these views. So, okay, we're focusing purely on, oh that's in red, let's have it in black. We're focusing purely on the ontological nature of the two positions. So ontological is to do with what exists. So an ontological existence is the key idea. And we've already spoken a bit about ontology and about the claims in the first videos that I did on this module were about the question of fundamental existence and so on and so forth. So existence in metaphysics is one of the key notions, and we're looking specifically at the ontological claims. So if you remember last week we did a little table. So the table looks something like this. If you remember, we had the different views. I won't draw the whole table out, but you should remember this from last time. We drew out the table, and then we had down the one side, so we had presentism. I'll just put the two in, presentism and eternalism, and then we had, for example, the ontological side. So if we split this now into three, 1, 2, 3. So we have ideology, and up here, I'll just write it across, sorry about the messiness, you'll get the idea, ontology. So we have past exists, present exists, and future exists, and presentism says no, yes, no, whereas eternalism says yes, 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 and ideology was time flows, and B-theory eternalism at any rate had it that time doesn't flow, whereas presentism. You remember this table? So we're kind of ignoring the ideological side of it and looking at the ontology of the views now. That's the idea. Sorry about the messiness of that, but I just wanted to remind you of it. You should remember it from last time. So we're focusing on the ontological issue, and the first issue that we need to have a look at then is how to understand the difference between presentism and eternalism. So let's start with a basic definition of the two views, presentism and eternalism. And we're focusing on these because they are eternalism and presentism are the two most widely held views. We know that there's also the growing block and the moving spotlight view, but they aren't as well held. The main opposition in the literature is between presentism and eternalism. And anyway, what we say about presentism and eternalism here would also end up applying to the other views as well, but we're focusing on these. And yeah, to be clear about this first issue, this is purely one about gaining a better understanding of the two positions. So there's a kind of objection that we're going to look at shortly, and the objection is that in fact there isn't really any difference between the two views. It's a merely verbal dispute. So the objection is really an objection to the entire debate. It's basically saying that the presentist-eternalist debate is an empty one. There is no real substance to it. But note that this first issue that we're dealing with isn't really one that's an objection to presentism or eternalism per se. It's an objection to the whole debate. And the answer that we're going to give to the objection isn't going to show that presentism or eternalism is more plausible. It's just going to show that the debate is a substantive one and give us a better handle on it. So how do we understand the views? That's what we're looking at here. And the objection that we're going to consider shortly is going to say, well, in fact, if we correctly understand the views, we'll see that there isn't really any difference between them. It's a purely verbal dispute. That is, it's a matter of semantics and nothing else. It's just presentists and eternalists are using words in different ways, and there's no real debate to be had between them, no substantive debate. So that's what we're going to do. Well, okay, a general definition of presentism would go something like this. It will say, only present things exist. So, only present things exist. And eternalism would say past, present, and future things exist. Okay, that seems to be a decent rough definition of the two views. We're going to see we're going to need to characterize them more precisely in a minute. So okay, what's this objection then? So the objection is, so I'll write that down here, objection, and remember this is not an objection exactly to either presentism or eternalism. As such, it's an objection to the entire debate, that there is no debate. So the objection, there is no substantive debate. There is no substantive debate. Oops. That's meant to be it. It is purely verbal, i.e. it's a semantic debate. It's not really about the existence of anything, it's about the meaning of the word exist, and that turns out to be an empty debate. So there's the objection. How does this objection run? Well, a good way to get an understanding with it, well, let's start with a particular claim. Let's start, and this is the one that I use in the book to illustrate this. So let's just put a star, and the star is dinosaurs exist. Okay, so let's take that claim, our starred claim. Dinosaurs exist. Now the intention here is, if we look at the presentist and eternalist position, the intention here is that presentists are going to disagree with that claim that dinosaurs exist, because so goes the thought, well, if they think that only present things exist, dinosaurs are no longer present, so they don't exist. And the thought is that the eternalists are meant to agree that dinosaurs do exist. So the eternalist is going to say something like, they're going to say, well, dinosaurs don't exist in the present. It's true that they don't exist but they do exist because there they are in the past, existing there. So what we want to say here is that presentists agree with this statement. So I'll just put a tick. An eternalist, other way around. I'll change that to a cross. Presentists disagree with this statement, and eternalists agree with it. And there we would have a disagreement between the presentist and the eternalist. So the objection that there's no substantive debate and it's purely verbal is that once we understand the sense in which presentists and eternalists understand the notion of existence, so we'll go the thought, in fact it turns out that they don't disagree about these matters. So let's have a look at how that's supposed to run. So the thought is, okay, well, let's focus on this word exist, and the question then is, how do we understand the word exist? And the thought is this, well, there are two ways to understand it. Two ways to understand exist. In that sentence. Okay? Alright. The first way of understanding it, according to this argument, is to understand it in a tenseless way. So to say that something or some things exist is to say that they exist now. Oh, let me make that a bit clearer. So this is the tensed sense. So, think about the word exist or exists. If I say, I don't know, what might we say? Jupiter exists. Well, exists is a tensed word. We're using it in the present tense, so that's going to be equivalent to exists now, right? If we want to say that things used to exist, we'd use the past tense. So dinosaurs existed, whereas Jupiter exists. So the thought is, we can either understand the exists in this tensed fashion, in which case exists equals exists now, or the other way of understanding it, they say, also goes this objection, is in a kind of a tenseless fashion. And the tenseless fashion, the idea is, well, if it doesn't matter what tense we're using, it's meant to cover all three of the tenses, then what this means is existed, exists, or will exist. So the thought is, we either understand it in a tensed fashion, or we understand it in this tenseless fashion, and these are more explicit ways of spelling out what they mean according to these tensed versions. So, okay, now we need to go back to our key claim and rewrite it using these two different senses. So this is our key claim, the one that we're looking at. We'll go to star 1. Well, okay, suppose we understand exist here in this way, in the tenseless way. Well, then what star means is dinosaurs exist now. Okay, so we've just substituted in this understanding of exists into this sentence. So we've got dinosaurs exist now. And then the thought is, well, what's the second way of understanding it? Well, that's in the tenseless fashion. So then we have to put into here dinosaurs existed, exist, or will exist. Okay, so then we've just substituted in this second tenseless meaning for our original exist to get that meaning. So, okay, according to this objection then, there are two ways to understand what exist means here. This is the first way, this is the second way. So then we've got to ask, okay, what would presentists and eternalists say about these two sentences? So let's start with 1. Well, on this view, then, dinosaurs exist now. Well, it seems fairly clear that presentists are going to deny that dinosaurs exist now. Okay, so we put another cross in there. But also, eternalists are going to deny that dinosaurs exist now. So we're thinking, remember, we're focusing on this. Eternalists aren't going to say that dinosaurs exist now, they're going to agree. So if we understand exist as meaning exist now, so goes the thought, then presentists and eternalists don't disagree. Okay. Well, now let's have a look at the second way of understanding it. So now we're looking at the dinosaurs existed, exist, or will exist. What will presentists and eternalists say about this? Well, presentists are perfectly happy with the idea that dinosaurs existed. They just deny that they exist. So goes the idea. So presentists are going to agree that dinosaurs with 2, and so are eternalists. Okay? So let's make this more explicit. We'll just use a P and an E. So presentists would disagree with the meaning on this one, and eternalists will disagree because neither think that dinosaurs exist now. But if we understand it in terms of 2, the presentists will agree because they do think that dinosaurs existed, and then the eternalists will also agree because they also think that dinosaurs existed. So here's the argument then. The argument says, well, here's a key claim about which presentists and eternalists are supposed to disagree. But what does this term exist mean in here? Well, there are these two ways of understanding it. So I've given there. One is in the tensed way, the other is in the tenseless way. And once we spell out what this means, so what this claim means, in terms of these two meanings, we actually find that on neither of the two meanings do we get a disagreement between presentist and eternalist. Therefore, they're not really disagreeing about anything substantive. They're just using existence in two different ways. So, okay, the thought then, to extend that further, the thought here is to say that when presentists say only present things, well, I'll come to that in a minute. When the presentists say that dinosaurs exist is false, they must be using the term in the exist now sense. And when eternalists say that dinosaurs exist is true, then they're going to be using it in this tenseless sense. But that just means that presentists and eternalists are using their words in different ways, and there's no actual proper substantive disagreement. Okay, so that's the basic way of understanding the objection. We're going to apply it now and have a look at the definitions of presentism and eternalism and see how they fare once we substitute in these two meanings. So maybe to make it clear, let me delete the canvas again, and I'll start again and sort of run through it. I do think this is a little bit tricky to get your head around when you first hear it, so I'll run through it kind of again, but this time looking, rather than a key claim that presentists and eternalists are supposed to disagree about, this time we're going to have a look at the definitions themselves and see what they say, and see how those fare on this. So let's put in our definitions again of presentism and eternalism as we had them. So what we had was this. Presentism is the view that only present things exist. Only present things. And let me put our disputed word then in red this time. Only present things exist. And eternalism, we're going to state that then as past, present, and future things. And let's put it in red, exist. Okay. So then the idea was that there are two meanings of exist. So the objection went, we can only understand the term exist in two ways. So exist means one of two things. The idea was, first of all, it means the tensed sense, in which case it's equivalent to exists now. Maybe I ought to put that like that. Or it equals the tenseless sense, which means existed, exists, or exists, or will exist. Okay, so then we're going to say, so according to this view, exist by itself is ambiguous. It means one of these two things. So then let's substitute in those two meanings. So let's use, I should have color-coded this better. So I'll tell you what I'll do. This should make it as clear as it could possibly be. Let's get rid of that one and put it in green. So we have existed, exists, or will exist. Okay, those are our two meanings. So now let's put in what it would be. Well, on the blue meaning then, this says only present things exist now. And eternalism, past, present and future things exist now. So to be absolutely clear about this, the claim is that the one in red needs to be disambiguated. We haven't yet spelt out precisely which meaning of the term exists, so the one in red can kind of be ignored according to this objection, and what we need to do is to put in the different disambiguations. So the blue one then is our first disambiguation, so the green one is going to be our second disambiguation, another possible meaning of exist. So only present things existed, exist, or will exist, and past, present and future things existed, exists, or will exist. Okay, so once we put in those two meanings and then consider the statements again, well, what do we make of them? Well, presentism, let's consider the blue meaning, that is the tensed meaning of existence here. Only present things exist now. Well, the idea is this comes out as being absolutely trivially true. Who could disagree with the statement that only present things exist now? Present just means what exists or what is now. So it's a kind of saying only present things exist in the present. That's just trivial. Everybody can agree with that, the eternalist and the presentist, and it's not a substantive thesis, it just says only the things that exist in the present exist in the present, so it's trivial. If we consider the green meaning then, only present things existed, exist or will exist, well, this is just plainly false. I mean, who could possibly hold that view, that only present things existed, exist or will exist? There are loads of things which existed, like dinosaurs, which are not present things, so the green meaning is simply false. Now let's consider the eternalist view, and we'll see there's a similar result here. Past, present and future things exist now. Well, that's plainly false. Who would want to say that past, present and future things exist now? Past things don't exist now. Dinosaurs, for example, don't exist now, so that's false. past, present and future things existed, exists or will exist, and then the idea is, well, that one on this reading is trivial. Obviously it's true. Who could disagree with that? Even the presentist agrees with that. So again we get this kind of result here, that if this objection is right and there's only two ways of understanding the notion of existence, then presentism is either trivial or false, and eternalism is either trivial or false. If we take the one meaning of existence, i.e. exists now, then presentism is trivial and eternalism obviously false. If we take the other meaning of existence, then presentism is obviously false and eternalism is trivially true. Either way, we haven't got anything substantive to argue about. Okay, so that's the idea, that's the objection. And the objection really centres on this thought that, well, this one here, that exist can mean only one of two things. If you agree with that, and there are some people who think that's right and do think that the debate is trivial, then, well, then we may as well just give up discussing the difference between presentism and eternalism. It's a futile, trivial, pointless debate. But perhaps, and this is what most people think, and in particular, so the notion I'm about to appeal to, the notion of existence simpliciter, which I'm going to explain in some detail because it's important. It's a kind of technical notion, but when we're talking about metaphysics and ontology, it's often important to introduce these technical notions. But I think you'll see it helps to clarify. So, at any rate, we can reject this argument, we can reject this objection that the debate is non-substantive if, in fact, we can reject the idea that exist means only one of these two things. So, the job, as it were, of the person who wants to defend the substantiality of the debate, that it's a real, genuine debate, has to provide an alternative, third account of what existence might mean. Okay, so in this first video, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of board work this week because I think it gives me a bit more freedom to try to explain things. In this first video, all I wanted to do was to present this objection. The objection is, hang on, this debate is trivial, or, well, this debate is non-substantive. Existence must mean one of these two things. Whichever one it means, if we plug it into some of the key claims that presentists and eternalists are supposed to disagree about, it turns out that they don't disagree. That was the dinosaurs exist claim. And if we plug it into the definitions of presentism and eternalism itself, then it turns out that each of the views is either trivially true or plainly false. Either way, we can't get a substantive debate going. So, that's all I wanted to do here. In the next short video, when I'm going to introduce this notion of existence simpliciter, then I'm going to introduce a suggestion about a third meaning for the term exists, which saves the debate. It gives us our substantiality back. It enables us to define presentism and eternalism and state the claims that presentists and eternalists disagree about in a way which shows that there is a genuine disagreement, and in a way that gives us a way of understanding the positions where they are neither trivially true nor plainly false. So okay, I'll turn to that in the next video.